The streets of Lagos buzzed with the usual chaos, impatient drivers blaring their horns, hawkers weaving between cars, pedestrians sidestepping potholes and puddles. In the back seat of a black SUV, Robert scrolled through his phone, half listening to a podcast through one earbud. His driver was maneuvering through Obalande traffic when the car jolted slightly, dipping into a pothole. Robert looked up briefly, annoyed at the bumpy ride, but his irritation faded the moment he saw something, or rather, someone, that made his heart stop. By the roadside, just near a tree, sat a woman on the bare ground. Her clothes were faded and dusty. Her hair was messy, barely held together in a rough bun. Two little boys, maybe 3 or 4 years old, clung to her, their faces smudged and tired. One wiped his nose with the back of his hand, while the other leaned against her, staring into nothing. There was something about her, something familiar. Robert leaned forward in his seat, eyes narrowing. It couldn't be. No, it couldn't. But as they drove past, a cold weight settled in his chest. He knew that face. He pressed his palm against the seat in front of him. "Stop the car," he said quickly. The driver pulled over a few meters ahead. Without waiting, Robert stepped out, ignoring the dust and noise. He walked back slowly, heart thumping, each step bringing him closer to a past he thought he'd left behind. She didn't look up. Her arms stayed wrapped tightly around the boy's. "Amaka," he said, his voice uncertain. She flinched at the sound of her name. Slowly she lifted her head. Their eyes met. For a second, the Lagos noise faded. All he could see was war. Tired, thinner, older, but still her. "Robert," she whispered, her voice hoarse. He took in the sight. The girl who once walked through the university campus like she owned it, full of confidence and laughter. Back then, she was untouchable. He had admired her from afar, a quiet boy she never noticed. Once, he tried to talk to her, awkward, stammering, and she'd laughed. Not in a cruel way, just the laugh of someone who didn't see him as anything more than another classmate. But now, she was sitting on the roadside, holding on to her children like they were the last thing she had in the world. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. Amaka shook her head. "Please, just go." "I can't," he said. "Not like this." She avoided his eyes, pulling her boys closer. "You don't owe me anything, Robert. Just leave it." He stood there silently. A thousand questions fought for space in his mind. Where was the father of the kids? What happened after school? How did she end up here? "Where are you staying?" he asked. She said nothing. "Are you sleeping outside?" he continued. Still silence. He stepped back, not wanting to push. "I'm not here to judge you, Amaka. I just want to help." The boys looked up at him, curious but cautious. One of them tugged at his mother's sleeve. Amaka finally met his eyes. "I was married. I left. No money, no family willing to help. I came to Lagos hoping for work. But things didn't go how I planned." Rupert felt the weight of her words. Life had crushed her. The pride she once had gone. "I have a place. You can come with me," he said gently. "At least for tonight. For the boys." She hesitated. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "I don't want pity," she whispered. "This isn't pity," he replied. "It's just kindness." Amaka closed her eyes for a second, breathing deeply. Then, with a nod so small it was almost invisible, she stood slowly, lifting her sons by their little hands. Robert didn't say another word. He walked quietly beside her, back toward the car. Maybe it was fate, maybe just coincidence. But in the middle of Lagos, noisy, restless, unforgiving. Something gentle had found its way through. Robert opened the back door of the SUV, gesturing for Amaka and the children to enter. The boys hesitated, eyeing him with suspicion, but Amaka gave them a slight nod, and they climbed in slowly. She followed, clutching her bag, if you could even call it that, a worn plastic sack tied at the top. Robert got in beside them. His driver glanced back in the mirror, confused, but said nothing as they pulled away. The silence in the car was thick. The city roared outside, but inside it was quiet. The hum of the engine, the only sound. Robert sat stiffly, unsure what to say. He glanced at the two boys. One had already leaned against his mother, eyes closing in exhaustion. The other kept watching Robert with wide, curious eyes. How old are they? He asked softly. 3.5, Amaka replied. Twins. He nodded. The car pulled into a quiet residential estate in Lekki. The contrast was shocking, from dust and roadside heat to manicured lawns and security gates. The boys' eyes lit up as they passed rows of houses with tall fences, clean streets, and flowers. They stopped in front of a modest duplex. Robert stepped out and opened the door for them. Inside, the house was cool and neat. The smell of freshly brewed coffee still hung in the air from that morning. Amaka stood in the living room, unsure whether to sit or stand. You can take the guest room upstairs, Robert said, pointing. Second door on the right. There's a bathroom attached. Amako nodded and led her sons upstairs, clutching their little hands tightly. Robert sat down on the couch and let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His mind raced. He hadn't seen Amaka in nearly 8 years, not since graduation. Last he heard, she had left for Enugu for her NYSC. That was it. No social media updates, no mutual friends. She had vanished, and now she was here. He stood and went to the kitchen. He wasn't much of a cook, but he found rice, some leftover stew, and fruit. Within an hour, a simple meal was ready. He placed a tray on the dining table, unsure if she'd even come down. But she did. Amaka entered slowly, the boys clinging to her legs. She looked freshly washed, though the clothes were still the same. Her face was bare, without makeup or expression. I made rice, Robert said. It's not much. It's enough, she replied quietly. She sat the boys down and fed them, patiently, piece by piece. Robert watched her, her hands moving with care, but her attention never breaking from her children. He cleared his throat. You don't have to tell me everything, but do you have anywhere to go? She shook her head. No family. My parents passed. My aunt was helping. But when things got bad, she said I was becoming a burden. Friends disappeared. I tried shelters, slept in uncompleted buildings. I begged. I did whatever I had to just so the boys would eat. Her voice didn't break. There was no self pity, no drama, just fact. That made it hurt even more. Robert rubbed the back of his neck. What about their father? Omaka let out a bitter laugh. Gone. He was charming at first, promised the world, but when I got pregnant and lost my job, he disappeared. Changed his number. I chased him for support, but I didn't even have money to go to court. Robert nodded slowly. He'd heard stories like this before, but it hit differently when the person sitting across from you had once been the star of your world. You can stay here for as long as you need. Amaka looked up, eyes cautious. Why are you helping me? Because you need help, and because maybe it's fate, he said, then quickly added, not that I expect anything from you. I just, I remember who you were, and this isn't where your story should end. She stared at him for a moment, then looked down, lips tightening. I don't know who I am anymore. You're still a marker, he said. You're still here. She gave a weak smile, barely. The days passed. Amako settled in, slowly. She cleaned, helped with meals, watched over the house while Robert went to work. The boys began to smile more, growing used to the stability. One evening, Robert came home to the sound of laughter. The boys were chasing each other around the living room while Amaka sat on the floor folding clothes. Her hair was tied neatly, and there was a softness in her face again. He smiled. They're adjusting. They are, she said, returning the smile. Later that night, they sat outside on the porch. The air was cool. The power was out in the neighborhood, but Robert had solar lights installed, so the compound glowed gently. Do you ever think about the past? Robert asked. Amaka chuckled. All the time, especially when I wonder how I went from campus beauty queen to whatever I am now. You're stronger now, he said. Back then, you were just admired. Now you're surviving. She glanced at him. Do you still write poems? He blinked. How do you remember that? You gave me one. First year. I pretended not to notice, but it was sweet. Robert laughed. That poem was terrible. It was honest, she replied. There was a pause, then she whispered, I'm scared, Robert, of being a burden, of starting over, of hoping again. He leaned forward. Hope is the only thing that's ever saved anyone. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away before they could fall. And in that quiet Lagos night, with stars above and wounds still healing, something unspoken passed between them. Maybe it was forgiveness. Maybe it was the start of something new. But whatever it was real. And this time, neither of them would walk away. 2 months later, the house felt different now. It wasn't just the laughter of the boys echoing through the hallways, or the scent of fried plantains wafting from the kitchen. It was the sense of warmth, a quiet stability that had slowly settled in. Amaka had started doing small jobs from home. A neighbor taught her how to make homemade liquid soap, and she began selling it to women in the estate. Robert helped her design labels, even built a small Instagram page for her. Orders trickled in, not much, but enough to spark something in her. Pride. One Saturday morning, as the sun filtered through the curtains, Robert found Amaka sitting at the dining table with a notebook. She was scribbling ideas furiously, her brows furrowed. You're working hard, he said, placing a mug of tea beside her. I'm trying to map out expenses, she replied. If I keep selling like this, I can afford to rent a small room in 6 months. Robert hesitated. You don't have to rush out. I know, she said, smiling softly, but I want to. I want to build something for me and my boys, not depend forever. I can't lose myself again. He respected that. He admired it. But somewhere deep inside him, a quiet ache had begun to grow. The thought of her leaving, of silence returning to the house. Later that evening, after dinner, the power went out again. The generator had run out of fuel, but no one panicked. They sat outside, the four of them, under the moonlight. The boys crawled on a mat, half asleep. Do you ever wonder how life would have turned out differently? Amaka asked. Roberto nodded. All the time. But if it had, we might not be sitting here right now. She turned to him. And does this, us, feel strange to you? It used to, he said honestly. Now, it feels like something I didn't know I needed. No, she
Silence
said,
passed between
we
them,
did.
full and warm.
And just like
I
that,
was so
a
sure my
broken
life was
past
over,
became a
Robert, she
shared
whispered.
future. The day you
Goodbye.
saw me by the road, I had decided that if I didn't make money that day, I'd give up. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I was breaking. His voice was soft. You didn't break. You bent, but you're still here. Amaka reached out and placed a hand over his. Thank you for stopping, for seeing me. Robert turned his palm over, fingers curling gently around hers. He didn't rush her, didn't ask for promises. But in that quiet moment, something passed between them. Not just comfort, not just healing, a beginning. 6 months later, Amaka stood behind a table at a small business fair in Surulere. Her products, soaps, oils, scrubs, were neatly displayed. A banner read Mama Tea and Company. The boys ran around nearby, full of energy. Robert arrived late, straight from work, short sleeves rolled up. He walked to her booth, proud. You did it, he said. Amaka smiled, glowing in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or lighting. No, she said, we did. And just like that, a broken past became a shared future. Goodbye.